Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I got David here. I got Andrew here. How you guys doing?
Outstanding.
Excellent. It's Saturday, and I get to talk about the games. So
Yeah. All right. So we were just talking about your new adventure coming out, David, on DM's Guild, hopefully today or tomorrow or very soon. Vecna.
Yeah, I'm excited for my Curse of Vecna adventure to come out. I've run it a bunch of times. I've had a lot of playtest feedback come back, and I've finally got through the chore of putting that all together. So I'm really excited to have that reach the public and have that off of my desk. So it's a
Nice.
double win for me.
And we got John just joining the stream. Hi, John.
Hello, sorry.
No problem. All right, Andrew. So, Andrew, tell us, how did you get involved in doing role-playing games?
I don't have one of those. When I was 6 and it was 1977 and Gary Gygax lived 3 doors down, I don't have one of those stories. So I've only actually been into tabletop role playing for like 6 years, 6 or 7 years, not a very long time. So came in on 5th edition, which wasn't actually the first game I tried. The first game I tried was Star Wars Saga Edition, it was called.
Okay. Yeah.
Which was also a D20 system. So I played that for a while, and then I got into D&D. And I got into D&D, and then I got into Adventurers League, which is something I know you guys are familiar with. And at one point, I was helping some friends organize events and stuff. And we would get adventures, and I said, you know what, maybe I can write one of these things. And it sort of kind of went from there. I was so nervous about my first adventure that to convince my friend who was running the events that he should let me write one, I actually wrote the whole thing, like beginning to end. And I said, okay, well, if you agree, this is what you get.
So, which was your first adventure?
It was called Six Summoned Swords. It's somewhere under the AL section there. Yeah, it's that
Okay.
first one there. Yeah.
Yeah. And you got a whole series of those, including Six Swords Out of Hell.
Yes.
Nice. And what kind of like level ranges do you cover with these?
Everything except tier 4. I've written only one tier 3 adventure, which was Six Swords Out of Hell, and I am writing my first and only tier 4 actually for Gamehole Con this year. So I've just finished the draft not too long ago and handed it in, and I'm looking forward to getting out to Gamehole Con and actually running it. I've always sort of thought that for tiers 3 and 4, you really need to, like, experience plays a big part in that.
Yeah.
Like, my sort of breakdown is always like, to run tier 1 D&D, all you need is enthusiasm. You don't even need to know the rules.
Yeah.
To run tier 2 D&D, you need that, and you kind of need to start to know the rules, because otherwise, things don't go smoothly. And then as you get tiers 3 and 4, you need experience, because the rules are no longer going to help you. Because even if you know how Wall of Force works and how a dragon works, when a player puts your dragon in a Wall of Force, if you don't have the experience of dealing with it, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, you can really get shut down as a DM if you don't know how to respond. Yeah.
Yeah.
So experience is a big thing.
Yeah, so I kind of always thought that, you know what, I'm not quite ready to do tier 3, and I'm not quite ready to do tier 4. So, and honestly, for tier 4, one of the things that I've always disliked in some of the adventures is that they're just basically tier 1 adventures with more hit points.
Yeah.
Which I don't like. Tier 4 needs to be, by definition, realm changing, realm affecting stuff. And I'll be honest, most of my ideas are not realm affecting stuff. And so I didn't feel any need. It's like, I need to make saving this cat from a tree, into a tier 4 because I want to make a tier 4. I mean, there's probably a clever way to do that if you want to,
Right.
but I never felt a need to push it. So Yeah.
It does. It's more than just giving the cat more hit points or the tree more hit points.
You have to make the tree taller also.
Yeah. Really high DC to climb that tree. Really high. All right, let's take a look at. So you've done a lot of Adventure League stuff. I'm going to share this screen here. And then you've really kind of branched out too from Adventure League, doing a lot of more content. You got the Contracted DMs Guild Adventures, some Adventure League, some other.
Yeah, and really, I think the first thing I really branched out into was doing Across Eberron, which a friend kind of reached out to me saying, "Hey, we're doing this. We're going to do Eberron right, and we're doing this series of adventures set in Eberron." And I'm like, I don't know anything about Eberron, but I can learn. And then I went through listening about 6,000 episodes of the Manifest Zone podcast, which if you're into Eberron, you should check out. It's great. It's got all the lore of the world and stuff. And Keith Baker, the creator, is on it, so it's that helps. So I learned all about Eberron and wrote March of Madness, which turned out, I think, well. And from there, sort of other things started coming my way, and I started applying, for different things when people were doing compilations and things. Ended up working on a bunch of different stuff like the Rashomon Companion there, which you have on the screen, the first thing on the left. My friend Joe Rasso put that together, and it was just a real pleasure to work on something, because I remembered, Minsk being Rashemi and me growing up I may not have grown up playing D&D, but I grew up playing Baldur's Gate. So like knowing Minsk and knowing the Rashemi, and I'm like, oh cool, I get to be part of the Forgotten Realms.
That's cool. I didn't know that's where Minsk came from.
It is.
Yeah.
And his whole thing is that he lost his Wiclar and his witch. So
Can we back up? Because one of the things about your story that I find fascinating is it's been fairly quick. You said you started maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and then in 2019 your first DMs Guild appearance appeared, and then in 2020 you've got 10 AL adventures coming out, and you've had sort of overnight success. How is that worked? I know there's a lot of folks perhaps who potentially would watch this stream or podcast or video who would be interested in freelancing, and it seems like you've gone from zero to working at least one freelance assignment for Wizards of the Coast all very suddenly. Has that been obviously your enthusiasm for writing, or what do you attribute that to, and is it replicable?
Yes and no, and I'll be very sort of blunt and honest, and as I tend to be. So I wrote an adventure, and back in those days, you were writing for the CCC program, or Community Created Program for AL, and it was a program that was there was a lot of bureaucracy involved with it. You had to be sponsored by a convention that wanted you to write an adventure, and you had to apply, and Adventurers League administration, who were resources of Wizards of the Coast, would approve things, and it was a 9-month lead up time. So to write an adventure, you basically had to apply for it 9 months ahead of time. It was like having a baby. No, it was probably nothing like having a baby, other than the 9 months. But it's long enough to have a baby, I guess. And there was a lot of bureaucracy involved with it, and a lot of sort of hoops to jump through, which was somewhat difficult to navigate. But thankfully, I had a lot of friends who were running events and who I was able to sort of go to and say, "Hey, can I write for you?" And I wrote my first adventure, and then I wrote my second adventure sort of very, very close to that, because I talked to Greg Marks, who you guys may know. He's still one of the AL administrators, and he was writing a con, and I had this idea for a shark adventure, and I said, hey, I kind of pitched it to him. He says, that sounds great, so let's do that. And so I did those two, and then that was it. And I couldn't really get any more work, but I would talk to anybody I could find that ran conventions. I would say, hey, do you want to let me write an adventure for you? I'll write an adventure for you. And there was like radio silence for like 6-7 months. And then one day, all the people I had talked to the previous year, all at the same time randomly said, you know what? Something's come up and we can let you do it. And so there was a year in which I wrote, I think, 13 adventures, which I don't recommend to anybody to do because, especially if you actually have a full-time job, which is not writing. So yeah, it was a lot of work. And when we talk about success, I mean, having something written and having something out there and being played and being liked is very nice and is a measurement of success. Being paid for it, which mostly was all of these adventures, nobody paid me to write them. It's all based on guild earnings, which generally like just about barely cover my time if you count by the hours. So it is not a mass financial success. Some of it is, but some of it is not. And part of, the biggest part of writing for AL is you write it as a sort of passion project because you get to talk every day with people who run this stuff, and you get to meet, like, I meet tons of people still every day. Every time I go to a convention, I'll meet somebody. Oh, I ran your thing, this thing, this is what happened. I know your adventure, which was out of guild work. I never hear or see. You write something, even if you're paid super well for it, and off it goes into the ether, and it exists, but you never see or hear from anybody who's ever touched it, usually. So there's different things that attract you to it. And sorry, and I'm probably rambling on, but one other thing is that year when I did all those AL adventures, it coincided with the CCC program expanding and kind of exploding. Like, because if you remember, because you guys were, I think, doing AL at the time, there was only, like 1 or 2 adventures every month. There was a lack of content. And then they opened up a CCC program, and suddenly there was tons of content. Like every day, something new on DM's Guild. And then, so I got in at just the right time when that was starting and people were still picking up everything that was new. Because within like 2 years of that and where we are now, there's now so much content, and when something comes out, it's, I don't want to say ignore it, but it's very difficult to get even the sort of purchase numbers that you could before.
I was going to ask you about, the shared experience of Adventure League. You're kind of just describing what I was feeling, like it's kind of going away. There was a lot of shared experience because everyone ran the same stuff. Yeah. And now, like you say, something drops and no one even knows it's there, it seems like.
Yeah. And it's, how do I say this? It's our fault as players. It's not entirely, but it's partially our fault because, you think back to 5 years ago when it was just like one campaign, Forgotten Realms. Anytime something would come out, at least I would. When I say we, I really mean I, but I think it was a shared sentiment. It's like something came out and everybody said, well, why can't we have this in AL? We want this in AL. Ravenloft's coming out. We want this in AL. Critical Role's coming out. We want this in AL. And then they gave it to us. And now there's 6 different campaigns and everybody's doing different things and nobody knows and like that shared communal experience is gone. So like they gave us what we wanted, but it probably wasn't the best thing for the campaign, for the program.
So are you attending any conventions this year?
I am. I was at GaryCon, which is done. I'm heading to Gen Con, which will be my first time ever at Gen Con. I'll be there with World of Game Design, who I've done some work with, like the wonderful Den of Assassins, which is right there behind David. I don't think I didn't notice that. That was one of my Kickstarter projects from a couple of years ago. It's a 5th edition supplement. So, and I worked with Zach Bowens, who is one of the key people at the World of Game Design. There it is. So I'll be at Gen Con with World of Game Design, and I'll be running the Hannibal RPG, which is a brand new system licensed on a TV show of Hannibal. So Hannibal Lecter, very different from D&D. Very different type of game, and I'm co-designing it with a couple of people from World of Game Design. So that's a whole different experience, designing a brand new RPG from scratch. So we'll be doing previews of that. It's not available. Like the Kickstarter is going to be later in the year, but we have the sort of the bones of the game done, and we're going to be running some previews of that. So I'll be doing that, and I'll be running some Star Trek Adventures, which we were talking earlier about 2D20, which I love as a system. I'm not in any way affiliated with them. I'd love to, Metafians wants me to write something for them, call me. But I love the 2D20 system in general. And so World of Game Design is actually, they've been representing Metafius at some of these conventions. So it's like everybody knows each other and stuff like that. So I'll be running some Star Trek Adventures, and they're running lots of other 2D20 games as well. But so that's what I'll be doing there, and I'll be hanging out at a booth and maybe doing a panel or something. But I'm kind of trying to leave some of that open because Gen Con scares me. I've never been to it, but the prospect of being somewhere with 200,000 people is not like calming to me.
It's a lot of fun, and the dealer hall is amazing. You'll have a great time there, I think. Yeah.
I'm assuming that the first 20 pages of the Hannibal role-playing game will just be content warnings.
Pretty much. It's if you've watched the TV show, it's kind of it's got a very specific tone, and we are being very, very conscious of that. It's a modern game, and we are looking at a modern audience, and we understand that there is a need for sensitivity, and we're going to have a note on session zeros and everything that you need to talk about. And we are, without going into too much details, we're trying to structure the game so that some elements can more easily be taken out if they're not in a zone of comfort for the players. But ultimately, it is a game of catching serial killers who commit fairly grisly crimes. So,
so there's a certain expectation of what you signed up for.
So if that basic premise is already too much for you, it's probably not for you. But I think there are ways to do it. There's so many great safety tools these days that it should be possible to, play a game where you have the same kind of experience or a similar kind of experience to what you expect when you're watching that type of TV show, that you have that at the table without it being, overwhelming for your...
I think you have a good chance. I mean, we've been doing safety tools a lot with AL, right, for the last several years. And really, in my experience, it almost never comes up. It's there as a safety net, but... it's really rare that it's a problem. So I don't see that you'll have too much trouble with the game, I don't think.
You know what? And I agree with you. The biggest benefit, I think, of safety tools, and I'm not by any means an expert in the thing, but the fact that you as a DM talk about it at the game's start, I think just talking about safety helps establish your table as a place for safety. The fact that, hey, we're going to think about this, and we're going to be concerned about this, and we're not going to let it go off the rails. So I think like that in itself, and that's what I think is a big part of why it doesn't come up, because you establish the table as, hey, we care about this, and discourages people from doing stupid things.
Well put.
I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
Oh, I was just saying that's well put.
Yeah.
So,
So Gen Con, and then you're talking about Gamehole Con
Yes,
later in the
and
year.
then I'm heading to Gamehole Con, where I am just going as a regular human being, and I'm going to be probably running my tier 4. I mean, I hope to be. But I'm just going to run a couple of slots, and the rest of the time, I love Gamehole Con. It's my favorite convention, and I kind of don't want to spend it working. So
Is
if
that
the
gonna
whole-
is your tier 4 going to be part of their area of AL? The Bandit
Oh
King?
yeah,
Is it
yeah, it's
Border
Border
Kingdoms?
Kingdoms.
Yeah.
Although again, as we say, with tier 4, it will concern more than the Border Kingdoms. So it will start in the Border Kingdoms, and where we go is somewhere else.
You'll leave the cellar with the rats in it. That's good.
You know, you mentioned that I have an adventure, and it was one of the first things I conceived is that I wanted to write adventure where you have rats in the cellar. So I have a um, Sisterhood of the Blade, which is my intro adventure, which I wrote. We used to run a con every year called Anime Con. Sorry, we didn't run it. There's a big anime convention in Toronto called Anime North, and our group would kind of run D&D there. And it was all people who've never played D&D, because it was not a gaming convention. It was just people who would come up and they would learn D&D. But we ran AL there, and I wrote the adventure for that group because we wanted something that's modular, that could be done like 1 hour, 2 hour, whatever. But I wrote it so that the adventure's content teaches people how to play the game. So like there's actually an in-adventure sort of training center for adventurers. So, but like, and while adventurers are being taught how to adventure, players are being taught this is how a saving throw works, this is how an attack works, this is how basic combat works. So, and in that adventure, part of the story is there's a dwarf who had lots of rats in his basement, and he did what any respectable dwarf with rats in the basement would do. He got some rat poison instead of hiring adventurers, and then the rat poison got stolen by some nefarious people. So you don't actually get to fight rats in the basement, but I wanted to reference the thing.
So I just wanted to pull up. How do you get to Adventure League games? I haven't gone and looked here lately, but I decided just to give it a try here. So Wizards of the Coast, and then you go to Dungeons and Dragons, and
I haven't even
then
seen. I don't think I've seen this one.
Events Adventures League. I guess you could go to player info if you're a brand new player want to try out Adventure League, and then they tell you how to create a character.
I don't think
And
we're
then-
seeing what you're seeing.
Oh, sorry. Let me share this tab instead. There we go.
There you go.
All right, so share this tab. So starting on Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, because it opens a new tab. That's why it happens. All right, then events, Adventure League, player info, and then you can play with just your friends. You can play Adventure League, and you pick up all the stuff on DM's Guild, Dungeon Master's Guilds right here, where you can run a lot of your adventures, or you can go to your website and go to the adventures, and I think they just go right to DM's Guild, right?
From my website?
Yeah, from your website.
Yeah. Any of those, you click on them, it'll take you to the
There you go, yeah.
that page, unless the link is broken. Yay! It's gold. 5-star rated. Please buy.
There it is. I picked the right one.
Uh,
33 ratings, 4.5. Nice. All right, so then player info, share this tab, and then you can play at home with friends. Somewhere they have like how to find it. Oh yeah, store an event locator. I haven't used that. They also have the Yawning Portal D&D Adventure League's blog and event site where you can sign up for games, and there's one coming up June 23rd to June 25th. So they do this like every month. You can go online and play games online. So easy to get into, I think. You kind of got to know where to look for this stuff. It's not super intuitive. It doesn't say, hey, you want to play a game? Click here. But it's there on the Dungeons and Dragons site. And then the next thing I wanted to start talking about, and you guys can ask any more questions you guys got, but 2D20 systems.
Yeah. What is it about the 2D20 system that you like so much? What
Yeah.
about the mechanics?
So again, background being coming from AL and coming from a lot of D&D, and then I was starting to sort of branch out and try different systems, and I tried a couple of the 2D20 games. One of the things that, and again, you can decide to what extent you feel it was missing from D&D or not. I've always felt like the social encounters in 5th edition were lacking in crunch, for lack of a better word. Like, you could have social encounters, but it was more like, okay, now you guys talk. And there was no kind of mechanical heft to it. And a lot of people will say, well, that's because you don't need any, because, we're just going to sit around and talk. And I want both. I'm a person who wants both the game and the social experience. I always say that D&D is like it's a combination of a chess match and Night at the Improv. And some people want it to be 90% chess match and 10% Night at the Improv. And some people want it to be the other way around. And I want both. I want 50-50. Like, I want there to be the chess element, and I want there to be the storytelling element. Like, I don't want more all that. Like, and I think that's part of the big draw of 5th edition, at least for me, is that it has the exact right balance of like where those things are. But one thing that I thought could always be better, or that I wanted more of, was kind of more when we're doing social situations. I wanted to be able to play out that tense negotiation where something can go wrong, but like going wrong doesn't just mean it turns into a combat encounter, but where people are actually pushing and doing things with their abilities to move the situation forward, but it's still a social situation. And most of the abilities in D&D are combat and stuff. So
Let's take a quick look at the rules, and then you can kind of fill in where that takes place in the rules. So let me share this screen here, and we'll pull up Conan, since it's, I guess, more familiar.
I've never played Conan, so that's
never played? More familiar to D&D players, and then I also have the other ones here too as well. But so if we look at the quick start on Conan, and I come down to abilities. Here we go. Okay, so basic rules. And it was interesting. I started looking at these 2D20 systems, and they all do it a little different. They're roughly similar, but Conan's more like D&D and how it does attributes and skills, and the other ones go a little bit different directions. So it'll be interesting to take a look at that here in a second. But, you have an attribute. That's your ability scores, basically, in D&D, and the range is a little different, but average is around 8 instead of around 11. Then you have your skills, and that's got a list of skills here on the next page. So here's some example skills like alchemy, crafting, healing, etc. So you have what's called a target number. You add if you're going to do some sort of check that has an outcome that's not sure and you want to roll a check for it, then you'd add your expertise and your skill, and you'd add your ability together and get a target number. So if you had a attribute of 9 and a expertise of 3, you'd have a target number of 12. And then it's called 2d20 because you start out with a dice pool of 2 20-sided dice. And if you're making just a basic check, you're going to roll those 2 20-sided dice and try and get less than or equal to your target number. And for every one that you do, it counts as a success. And there's difficulties for this success. There is a difficulty number from 1 to 5, or actually they even have 0 difficulty ones, 0 to 5, to determine whether or not you succeed. And here's kind of a range of, an average difficulty task is you need 1 success. That would be shooting an enemy at optimum range. And then 2 successes, shooting an enemy at optimum range in poor light, or like 1 range category further than your weapon normally has. And so they have this thing here. And the interesting part, like you're saying, I think, is that there's lots of ways this can be tweaked up and down. If we look at the skill check, you also have skill focuses, and your skill focus, it gives you like an extra success. So if you're doing, for example, Zarina has skill focus and survival, anytime a player rolls 1, 2, or 3 on one of those 2 d20s, it counts as an additional success. And if you, whenever you roll your dice, there's a chance you'll have complications. And you can, if you roll a 20 on any of the 20-sided dice, you add complications to the roll. So you can succeed and still generate complications, which would play in, I think, to social encounters a little bit that way. And then if you succeed with more successes than you need, you gain momentum, and there's like a pool of momentum that the party can kind of spend together. You can spend your own momentum in your same turn, or you can put it in the party's pool to spend later. And all the D20 systems I saw, the 2D20 systems I saw, had slightly different names for these things, but it kind of seemed like the same kind of thing was there for each of them. And then you have Doom, which the DM builds up, and you can actually spend Doom to gain the equivalent of momentum. So you can like up the risk that's happening in an encounter in order to achieve something you wanted to achieve. So a lot of give and take on any skill check, basically. Here's some examples of what you can spend your momentum on, and you get that when you have extra successes or you add to the Doom pool. So that's the general basic system. And how does that play out? You've played the game, so
Yeah.
what kind of things does that do in gameplay for it?
So, and I think you hit up on it. So the momentum system is really the core of 2D20, and having this basically pool of points that allows you to do different things, such as buy additional dice for your difficulty. So like you said, the basic is you put two numbers together, which is your ability, and sometimes it's your skill, or sometimes it's your other ability. So like in Star Trek, for example, you will have something like your intelligence, and then you might have your skill in engineering and something like that. And so you might pair intelligence, there we go, attributes. So you might have a control and security role, or you might have a control and science role. And you put those two numbers together and you immediately know what your target is. So like control, what is 8 for this character, and command is 4. If we're making a control command roll, it's a 12.
So you roll 2d20s, and everyone you get below 12 or below, you get a success.
Correct. And 1 is a crit, so you get 2 successes. And then if you have a focus in command, in a skill that's under command. So there's the focuses, right? So if you're doing, so this person has a focus called fearless. So if their control command thing is to order people to rush into a dangerous situation, then the fearless focus applies. So now they have a command score of 4. So now they will crit on anything up to 4, up to their command score. So that makes it easier. And if you have momentum, you can spend 1 momentum to get a 3rd die to your pool. So base difficulty is usually, I think base difficulty is 2 for most tasks. Sometimes you'll have a 1, sometimes you'll have a difficulty of 0, which I'll talk about in a second, because that's actually a neat thing about the system. But you can have a difficulty of 5. Heck, you can have a difficulty of 10, and it's like, well, how do you get 10 successes on rolling 2d20s? Well, because you can crit on each, so you can get 2 out of each, and you can buy or otherwise gain up to 5 total dice. So you start with 2, so you can have 5 total dice, and if they all crit, you can have 10 successes. So that would be very difficult.
And you have teamwork too, where teammates can have more dice.
Yeah, and it's kind of equivalent to an assist in D&D, where somebody says, well, I will help them, and they give you an extra die, which they roll using their own attributes, but you get the result. So the nice thing about that sort of skill and momentum system is that it can apply, mechanically, it can apply equally to a social situation or to a combat situation. So, if I'm swinging my sword at somebody and, I have to hit a difficulty 2 in order to hit them, I can spend 1 momentum to get an extra die, and I can use my talent at sword swinging to re-roll one of the dice. So now I'm using my character stuff to, to make this happen, right? And, I hit them, etc. But if I'm in a social scenario and I'm trying to convince a character to do something, again, it's a difficulty 2, and I can use my momentum to buy an extra die to help me, convince them of something, and I can use one of my talents that helps with stalking to reroll a die. So you get the same mechanical framework regardless of what you're doing. And that's what I think, that's what I really like about 2D20. And then, as you've noticed, there is a base system where, hey, you put these two numbers together and you have momentum, but each of their different settings or IPs, so Star Trek, Dune is probably my favorite, but because I both love the world, and how can you not love that cover? It's probably like the greatest RPG cover ever. I might be overstating. But Dune is really cool because look how simple this is. You have your drive, which is the sort of your character's motivation. So you have duty, faith, justice, power, and truth. And then you have your skills: battle, communication, discipline, move, and understand. And anything you're doing, either the GM or you can choose, you say, well, I'm motivated by faith in this. And it is a battle skill. So you take your 7 in faith and your 7 in battle, and you put 14, and there's your target number. It's very sort of, it's very intuitive, I find. So sorry, going back to how it applies across different things. So you're using the same mechanical basics to either convince somebody of something or hit them with a sword. But different games will have additional bolt-on mechanics. So momentum still works, and how you roll 2d20s work the same in all the games. So if you understand how it works in Dune, you understand how it works in Star Trek or in Conan. But then each of the games, depending on the setting, will have different additional things. Like Star Trek, Fallout, Achtung Cthulhu have ranged weapons, and they have special powers and stuff like that. So there's a whole special thing. And Achtung Cthulhu also has vehicle rules, and Star Trek has starship rules. So you wouldn't have starship rules in something like Conan, obviously. Conan has very expanded melee rules. Achtung Cthulhu has rules for sort of dark spell casting at a cost. But all of it is still driven by the basic momentum pool. And one thing I love, especially, I said that Dune is one of my favorites, is you can also do things, and there's different versions of this across different games, but you can create traits. So if I'm doing a roll and I get 5 successes instead of 3 successes, so I have extra. In D&D, if you roll higher, that's fine. You still hit. Here, you can do extra things. First of all, you have the momentum pool, so I can bank the 2 extra successes, and then somebody else can use them in the future to succeed. Or I can create a trait. So if I'm talking to an NPC and I'm trying to convince them that, maybe I'm trying to set up a false persona. I'm trying to convince them that actually, I'm a traitor and, not actually an assassin here to kill them. And if I succeed, I can put a trait on that NPC, and that trait is believes everything I say, for example. And you make that up as you go. But that thing I just made up during role-playing, because I've paid, my resources, I've paid my 2 momentum, and, the GM agreed that it's an acceptable trait. There's a little give and take. But that now actually has a mechanical thing, because the next time I encounter that NPC, that trait is there. And if I do something to use the false persona that I've set up with them, that task now becomes easier. So it's kind of, you have this role-playing thing. It's like, I'm just bullshitting this person. Can I? I'm just bullshitting this person and making this up, but I'm actually going to create a mechanical thing in the game based on the fiction that I've created, and that will have a mechanical impact later. And I think that's just awesome.
So this does involve a lot of like on the spot ad-libbing on the DM's part and such, and that can be, I worry that might slow the game down. But they do offer, if you have no idea for what to do for a complication in at least Conan, and maybe the other ones have the same thing, you can always just add to the Doom pool. So
Yes.
yeah. So if you can think quick on your feet, or you have a good idea for what the complication might be for a given check, where they rolled a 20 on one of the dice, you can throw it in, or you can just keep bumping up the Doom pool for them.
Yeah, and Doom, or it's called Threat in some of the other games, is also a great part of the system because, there's always the question of like having like the antagonistic DM or something like that, which you don't want to have. But what this system does really nicely is that it actually gives the DM a pool of points to use against the party to make the game more difficult. But because that pool is essentially created by the players, it removes that antagonism. It's like, hey, I as a player, I want to succeed. I am choosing to give you threat. So I know you will use that against me. But we're kind of like, we're now making a deal. It's like, you will help me here, and later something bad's going to happen. And to your point about ad-libbing, I know that in Star Trek, I think there is a list of suggested complications. There is also you can always bank it, like you said, as threat. Like, so if a complication comes up, I've often had the DM say, you know what, I'll just take 2 threat. And 2 threat could be used, if you're attacked by 6 enemies, you can add a 7th enemy, for X amount of threat or something like that. So, it gets really interesting. And, the give and take between threat and momentum and stuff.
I like their unskilled tests. One thing that can kind of be a pet peeve in D&D is the unskilled players making checks and beating the skilled players at their checks, right? Make a history check, and the fighter barbarian makes it, and the wizard with history skill fails it. So they do a little thing here where unskilled tests, you can make them, but complications occur twice as often if you lack skill expertise for a particular test. That was pretty interesting, I thought.
Yeah, and there is a lot of sort of things where you can fiddle with the system. Like even in Star Trek, you have certain talents that allow you to do something risky. Talents are kind of like feats in D&D. It's like there's a talent that's a talent list. So whenever you make a character, you will end up choosing I think it's 3 to 5 talents depending on which system you're playing. And they're kind of special things that your character can do, like reroll dice and stuff like that. But some of them will be like, hey, when you use your talent, your complication range increases. So usually you only get a complication on a 20, but if you're doing something crazy risky, your complication may be 17, right? So now 17, 18, 19, or 20 are all complications. So they're like, the system can get, it sounds sort of very RP friendly, but it can get very crunchy if you want it to. But at the same time, you can also just keep it fairly light. So however you want to run it, like if you want to get super crunchy with it, you can, and there is it allows for that. But you can also keep it fairly light.
So in your experience with these system, with the D20 game or the 2 D20 games, let me preface this. In my experience with running one-shots at cons for systems like Fate and stuff like that are very different mechanically from what some experience, especially folks who are experienced with D&D. And there's a lot of give and take in the mechanics where, Fate, you've got your fate points and you're giving them, there's a back and forth and invoking aspects and stuff like that. There really needs to be a lot of mastery on both sides of the screen for the game to really play well. And so that's why one-shots often with Fate don't work as well as other systems. How does this play at a starter table? Can players pick it up quickly and start really milking the system? Or are they pretty much being sort of puppeted a bit by the GM the way they can be in a game like Fate?
I don't have a lot of experience with Fate, although I do think that from what I've heard, 2D20 is somewhat not related, but maybe similar to Fate. But again, not having played Fate, I don't actually know that, but I've heard that from other folks. So my first like 3 or 4 experiences with 2D20 was sitting down at a con game and playing for the first time, knowing nothing about the system. So I would just sit down and I would play Star Trek, having not read anything, just like, hey, I signed up, it's Star Trek, I know what Star Trek is. And so from a player standpoint, I found them very easy to pick up. If you look at the just at the character sheet itself, you can go back to the character sheet. Like we talked about a whole bunch of things, but if you look at this character sheet, like this here, this is pretty much everything.
Right.
So, and the biggest part of this, the talents, those like maybe 80% of the time, those don't even apply. So like you can play a fully successful game of Star Trek that's fun for everybody and like not have talents on the sheet. So like if you imagine that part being blank, there's very little on this sheet for somebody to take in. So from a player perspective, and I highly recommend it. Like if you're in a con and 2D20 is being run, just go play something. It's very, like I said, it is very intuitive. Just say, hey, I, the DM, will tell you that it's fitness and security, and you will add those 2 numbers together, and then you roll 2D20. And the momentum system, because everybody's playing with it and everybody's using the same pool, so it's being used literally on every single roll, you pick it up very quickly and you understand it's like, oh, okay, so I succeeded by 1, so I can bank this momentum or I can ask the DM a question. And then it becomes immediately a team thing, because it's like, well, what should I do with this momentum? Well, we don't have any momentum, so let's leave that in the pool because the next person can use it. Or we have 5 momentum, you know what? Do something fun with it, And because everybody's using that same thing, regardless of their individual character, it's really easy, I find, to learn at the table.
Cool. Thanks.
Got John Carter of Mars here. Yeah, so a lot of different systems.
Yeah, this was their first one, I think.
Was it?
I think it might have been their first one.
And, well, this is interesting. It shows the combat die. So you do like, if you roll if you don't have their special combat dice, you roll d6. On a 1, it does 1 damage. A 2, it does 2 damage. 3 and 4 does no damage, and then 5 and 6 does 1 damage plus an effect.
Yeah, so. And that is that combat die. It's present in probably about half of their systems, the ones that are more combat focused, like Fallout has it, Star Trek has it for ground missions. I want to say, I don't know what kind of dice Conan has, but they probably have it. But that D6 stays standard. But like Dune doesn't have it. Achtung Cthulhu has it. And I'm starting to run out of the games that I can remember off the top of my head on a Saturday morning. So.
Yeah, I think Conan does have it. I was reading that in Conan. So let's look at how combat would work if I share Conan instead. And you'll have to fill me in here because I don't necessarily have the full grasp of it. So, coming down.
Well, like I said, I haven't played Conan specifically, but I'm sure I can probably figure it out based on other games.
Yeah. Okay, so you have rounds that are not fixed duration. You have a standard, a minor, and a free action. You have, if there's an indecision thing, if the players take too long, you can add to the Doom pool. Do other games do that too?
I haven't seen that, but yeah. I think that's more. That sounds like more of a GM thing, and that sounds. Yeah. So Conan is one of the older games. I think they actually I think the license has now passed on to somebody else. So.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to pick up the many Conan books, I think a lot of them are on sale, and
yeah,
they might be going out of print. But I think that might be a just an older thing. I don't know if I'm putting together a game today, I'm putting something like that in. Because that does seem a little antagonistic.
Right, it is a little bit.
Yeah, but again, you look at something 10, 15 years old that's, and I don't know how old this actually is, but yeah. So yeah, I don't think I've seen that in other games, but
they have it where you can do multiple reactions in a round, and each extra reaction you have to spend Doom to get.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing was the core system of the Doom and Momentum. Like, you can do things like, so there is initiative, but you can spend 2 momentum to keep the initiative. And the initiative is usually one of the player characters goes, then one of the enemies goes.
Okay.
But you can spend 2 momentum to have 2 players go in a round.
Okay.
So, and I don't know if that's the same in Conan.
It was in Conan, all the players went first, and the game master could spend a point of Doom to interrupt and have a monster go. Otherwise, all the monsters go at the end, or NPCs at the end.
Yeah, Conan is much more focused on the melee combat, from what I know. So it's a little bit different from the other systems in that.
They have zones. Do they all have zones,
Jeremy? Yeah, they all have zones. Usually there's 3 zones.
Yeah, they have close, medium and long, and extreme.
4.
And they talk about, you set it up with like the start of an action scene. The game master will define the zones. Generally, 3 to 5 distinct zones is a good place to start. And you can move between zones using different types of actions. Moving anywhere within close is free. Medium is minor. Long is standard, but also gets +1 difficulty to all the other tests if you do that. And then coming down to attacks, you make your different types of attacks, and the target can defend with a reaction, which they would have, and that makes it a struggle check or an opposed check, like in 5e terms.
Yeah.
And then you let's see, your weapons do different types of damage, and they have the combat dice like we saw in the other one. And different weapons have different amounts of combat dice. Yeah. And when you take damage from these swords that's marked off from a particular form of stress, they have different forms of stress. In this one, vigor, mental's resolve. And if it does 5 or more damage in one hit, it reduces vigor or resolve to 0, or reduces to 0. You take a point of harm.
Yeah. And that's typically how the 2d20 systems work. They usually have 2 pools, one being stress being kind of your hit points. And again, you can take stress during a social situation potentially, but which is why I like that it's called stress. And then they will have injuries, which will take you out of combat or require a longer term thing. And for injuries, you'll notice I don't think there's even a separate tracker for injuries. Like if you're injured, you just injured, then it's a whole separate mechanic.
Yeah, interesting. It's a little bit less detailed here. It looks like in Star Trek than it was in Conan, which makes sense since Conan's a lot more about the combat.
Yeah,
Conan,
and
let's see, you get harm. As you take harm, it reduces your ability checks, and it can be treated once per day only. And if you get it treated but then take more harm, it reopens your wounds. And if you've taken 5 harm, I don't know if that was at the very top, you die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is Star Trek like that, or they do a different system, or Doom?
With Star Trek, it's injuries, and I think injury just takes you out of the scene until you're healed. So it's a little, I think it's a little less extreme, because again, it is a much less combat focused game.
Right. That's interesting. So it takes you out of the scene. That's kind of the same thing that does Blades in the Dark do that? I know Candela Obscura, which is largely based on Blades in the Dark, does that.
I've not played Blades in the Dark, but I have read the Candela Obscura intro.
John, do you know?
Blades does something similar to that, and it gets tweaked in the different versions of the Forged in the Dark engine. but it's similar.
Yeah. Then let's look here at the Dune sheet. So how does Dune handle it, Andrew?
For combat and that, you'd have to look at the combat bit because I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
So, I love 2D20, but I'm not
Yeah.
that pro of an expert.
Tom, do you mind switching back for a little bit to some more of Andrew's work?
You bet. Let
I
me,
just have a question or two about that.
Uh-oh.
Well, one
No,
thing
no,
I was
no,
looking
no,
at,
I'm kidding. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Andrew, was your product up here, the Den of Assassins, and your latest Kickstarter, Deep and Dangerous. I
Yeah.
just want to mention, first of all, the Den of Assassins. First of all, I was a little surprised when I was reading the introduction, and it says these assassin concepts bring light and laughter to assassin play. I was puzzled by how that could work, but I noticed that the Bard College of Assassins, this is like anybody can play an assassin. This is sort of the part of the scheme of the book. The Bard College of Assassins is called the College of Ominous Whistling. That was hilarious. Brilliant.
That's just a good Western there.
Exactly. Anyway, the art, the map art in that book is just amazing. It's got a few battle maps in there, and those are spectacular.
Yeah, those were done by Christian Zoik. And if you buy the digital version on drive-through, I believe you get all the digital versions of the maps for your BTT pleasure. So,
Yeah.
Path of Splatter.
Exactly. It's
Well,
kind of amusing.
and so that was the concept of this book was I love assassins. And I was honestly kind of surprised that nobody had Assassin's Creed, which I've never played, but I'm aware of its existence and popularity. And, John Wick and stuff like that. Like, assassins are very popular in popular culture and in gaming culture. And I'm like, how's there not a D&D assassin thing? And I wanted to make one. And the core concept was to basically create a subclass for every class that could be an assassin that didn't have to be a rogue. Also, I have many personal pet peeves with the rogue assassin subclass, which I won't go into. But I fixed them I fixed all the problems ever with the assassin with 1 feat in Deep and Danger in Den of Assassins. But the humor part of it was. And I think it comes through because, like, the things that I like with Assassins are things like In Bruges and Killing Eve, which have this kind of a humor, not like a dark humor to them. Like, it's because really murdering people is not great. Like,
Hot take.
So you kind of have to look at it through a humorous pulp lens, because otherwise it just, it's probably not something I want to deal with necessarily. So yeah, and if you thought that was funny, like, did you see The Wizard?
What's the Wizard subclass?
The Wizard's subclass is the School of Hard Knocks. And essentially, like, the idea with that one is that you didn't go to fancy wizard school. You basically grew up on the streets and learned magic because you had to kind of learn some of it to survive. And basically, and one of the things that I like incorporating in subclass design is role-playing sort of prompts. So you have ideas of how to play the character. So with the School of Hard Knocks, for the first, I think, 6 levels, you can't learn wizard spells normally. You can't, like, scribe every wizard spell ever into your book. But you can learn, like close range spells and touch spells from any class, because again, it matches that idea that you were just learning stuff from whoever you can on the street, and then eventually, once you become better off and more prominent, you're able to go back to normal wizard learning and backfill that. But like, it helps with create the in-game fantasy, I think of how that type of subclass would play out.
Yeah, and then one of your follow-up Kickstarters was the Deep and Dangerous Kickstarter there that kind of delved into sort of an Underdark flavor, I guess, with classes, races, and then some DM tools.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I have a deeper question about this, but go ahead. Tell us about this product.
So we are quite literally very close to fulfilling it. Like, we've sent out the PDF. We're just working out some issues. We're delivering it through the print versions through print on demand, through drive-through. We're not doing our own print run for this one. And we're just working out some things with the printing settings, because every time something's wrong with one of your proofs, you basically have to wait 3 weeks for them to send you a new proof and stuff to fix things. So we're just fiddling with it, but like, the book is done, the backers have the PDFs. We're just waiting. Literally, probably within the next week or so, we're gonna get the hard copies going. And the concept was I love the Underdark, because you may have noticed by the fact that I've written 20 Underdark adventures. And
so many drow.
Well, I grew up reading the Drizzt books, right? And so that was kind of my introduction in a big way to D&D. So I didn't play, like I said, I didn't play D&D until much later. But like, I read Forgotten Realms novels, I played Baldur's Gate, so like, I was very aware of the D&D world. I just didn't know that there was some game involving dice associated with it. Maybe it's an immigrant thing, because I didn't grow up in a place where that existed. So I just came on Dungeons and Dragons. It must be like any other brand of things, right? Like, I didn't realize that it meant based on the dice game. So, but anyhow, so yeah, I loved Underdark. So, and the idea behind this was to create a sort of a supplement, like a spiritual successor to Den of Assassins in terms of format. Like, here's a subclass for every class, and then here's some antagonists for you to use, and then here's some other DM stuff. But the theme here was just underground exploration, and we actually ended up splitting it into kind of micro themes or whatever. That's not an actual term, but basically there would be general underground exploration, and then there would be the two things that you typically find underground, which is underworld creatures such as demons, and far realm stuff, or void stuff. So basically everything is themed around one of those three things, either kind of general digging in the dark, or demon related stuff, or void related stuff. Like, all our monsters are one of those three things, all our items are one of those three things, and our subclasses are also one of those three things.
And this product's reached the DMs Guild as of this week, if I'm
right. I don't know if it's actually,
I think I saw that in the product updates, but I could be mistaken.
I'm looking.
I'm
not
seeing it.
Okay, maybe not. Here's my philosophical question that I'm curious about your take, and maybe this is a strategy question. You've done these two Kickstarters that we talked about, and both of them are kind of grab bags of character options. This one has character races. They've got DM's resources like maps. And in a way, that seems like a smart strategy. That's certainly what Wizards of the Coast is going for with their Tasha's type books, where you've got something to appeal to everyone, because you don't want just DMs buying your books. That limits it too much. but I'm curious about your take on the market appeal, I guess, as a third-party publisher of character options, because they have a couple of challenges that they face as an appealing option. One is that they're not on DM's Guild, not DM's Guild, on D&D Beyond, and I know all of us, so many of us, me particularly, are too reliant on D&D Beyond and just cringe at the thought of going and taking a playtest character and making it by scratch. The trials that I have to put up with. And then the other thing is that character class options are sort of a high risk thing to add into a campaign. If you've got an adventure, you've got a monster, anyone can throw that in. It lasts for a session and it's done. You never have to see it again. But if you're doing a character option and it turns out to be broken or underpowered or something like that, you're kind of stuck unless you want to rework it. But on the other hand, this is sort of the centerpiece of these books. So what's your take on the value of character options in the market? Or is it a hard way to go, or is it something that people respond to, or something they like?
I mean, I think that was so Den of Assassins was really the first. I've done a couple of one-off character options just on DM's Guild, but for the most part, that was the first time I really delved into character options. They were very central to the concept of Den of Assassins, because the core concept was an
Absolutely
assassin subclass for every class. So that was very much the central selling point.
And I love that idea.
The central selling point. Things kind of I've learned. I'll share a secret. It's actually DMs who buy books.
Okay.
Another hot take.
Heads up.
Yeah. DMs are who actually buy books. And again, I'm not saying, hey, players don't buy my books. Please buy my books. They have player stuff in them. For Den of Assassins, we actually did a split PDF that you could give to just the players with just the player options. I think we decided that it was not worth the trouble to split it off. For the second month is just get the whole book. It's not that and also our books are not that expensive. That they're cost prohibitive. So I think that, and you notice that 2/3 of those books or more are DM content. So I think it's important to have DM content because, like I said, DMs for the most part are who buy the books. Players do as well. And a lot of people buy books who are not players or DMs, who are just buying books so that they can have them on the shelf or to read them or to enjoy them. And, that's a fact of life. And I'm happy for people to buy my books for whatever reason they want. So in terms of your very valid issue of stuff not being in D&D Beyond, that was very much especially an issue during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, when everybody was playing online, including myself. I tried to mostly go back to in person now, but I still have a couple of online games. And yeah, it's difficult to get stuff in D&D Beyond, and I agree with you. And about putting things into your game, we have it in. So I'm in a regular game for with my friends. One of the main games that I'm in. We have a big campaign, and when we're doing these books, I said, hey guys, I have these Kickstarters. You guys want to use some of the options from the books? And the way we handled it is, if a player looked through the book and wanted to use something, and we have rotating DMs, so it's not just, hey, I will allow everything because it's my game. We have rotating DMs, we take turns. It's not really a West Marches, but it's similar to that in style, and that we have an open world and we take turns doing little arcs of games set in the same world and for the same characters. but all the DMs would have to agree that the option is valid to use. And if something breaks, we say, hey, you know what? We're all mature enough to sit down at the table and say, hey, you know what? This ability is broken. We're just going to use it a different way. So I don't think that that's a big issue. And even at our table, we have lots of very experienced people, but out of 6 people, I think 2 were even interested in using something else, and others were like, no, I'm happy with base character options. So it was less of an issue than it was expected. I'll also tell you just kind of a side thing with World of Game Design. At most of the cons, they run these kind of epic adventures where you get gens and you're put in a special scenario, usually with some terrain. And we made some level 7, I think, pre-gens based on Den of Assassins and for people to use in those games. So a bunch of people used them at a con. And as far as I'm told, people had a lot of fun with them. So
that would be a fun game.
Yeah,
for sure.
A whole group of assassins would be a great game on all the different character class bases.
Yeah. So I don't know if that fully answers your question. Like, I agree. Like, there are definite issues. And it's hard to say, hey, let's use all these third-party options. But I think if you change the context of it to, hey, if you, the player, want to use a specific cool character option from another book in the campaign, bring it to us, bring it to me, the DM, or us, the DMs, if there's multiple, and let's look at it. Let's see if it, is crazy. And if it's not, then, could probably make it work.
Yeah, I think that's all good advice. I've run campaigns where players have brought their own character classes of their own devising. And, in this particular case, it's turned out to be generally underpowered, but he was just delighted to be able to use his own creation. So there's always the option of a conversation if something goes awry, but more options, great. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. You guys got any last questions for Andrew? No? Andrew, what do you... so I'll see you at Gen Con. I'm going to be at Gen Con. I'll swing by and say hi to you.
Come play Star Trek.
Yeah. What was that?
Come play Star Trek.
Oh, yeah. That would be fun. That'd be a lot of fun. Okay. Well, thanks for being on the show, and we'll see you all later.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, folks.